studied cello with a teacher together. And so just a couple of comments about that. Hillary has 3 sons, and I have to say her household is a very rambunctious place. And so I try to figure out at times, is Hillary stoking the energy in that household, or is that energy stoking her? It's an important question. Hillary served, I live on Bay Ridge Island, and Hillary served on the city council some years ago, introducing some very interesting innovations with regard to energy and various environmental issues in our community. And to see her political trajectory has really been it's been great. Hillary, Commissioner Franz was elected in 2016 to serve as our state's Commissioner of Public Lands. And by virtue of that, she is, I guess, CEO of Department of Natural Resources for Washington State. Her mission, as well as the mission of the agency, is to protect and manage nearly 6 million acres of public lands in our state, including coastal waters, aquatic reserves, working forests and farms, commercial developments, and recreation areas. And Commissioner Franz is committed to ensuring our public lands are healthy and productive, both today and for future generations. And a note on that is, she, as a member of our city council, and also I've served as a member of our Washington State Community Forestry Advisory Council, that Hillary is working on the mandates and obligations of the agency and as a commissioner. But she has a vision for the future. She is acting on the future of our state and the future of our natural resources. So please welcome with me Commissioner Hillary Franz.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I have to use that. Did I do that? No, I did that. Okay. All right, usually the lights don't go out when I come in. I guess I took out all the energy. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I love seeing so many of you, and it reinstills a really great sense of hope, actually, given all of the challenges we're facing. And so to see so many of you here really working hard on this issue, I really appreciate. I have to start by acknowledging, obviously, the First Nations communities and the lands we're sitting and standing on today, the Coast Salish people, and the land and water that binds us. They are always my mentors and my inspirers and the leaders that help me in the job I have every day. I'm going to just start with, unfortunately, I these days have to start with some of the gruesome, challenging news. In my job, I oversee 2.6 million acres of aquatic lands, 2 million acres of forest, 1 million acres of agricultural land, and I oversee Washington State's firefighting team for wildfires. And I will tell you, I also oversee Washington State Geology Survey, so if you think about 5 live volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, landslides, floods, we're now responding to floods too. We're literally on the front line of a rapidly changing climate. There is not one day that goes by that my team and myself are not aware of how rapidly that environment is changing and the real world consequence it is having for every single person in Washington State. Can't be missed with the context of wildfires. Last year we had the most wildfires in Washington State's history with 1,850 wildfires. We were fighting fires from the beginning of April all the way into November. 40% of those fires for their first time were west of the Cascades. This year already we've had 300 fires. We had 54 fires in the second week of March, 53 west of the Cascades in the communities of Waukegan and Grace Harbor, Cowlitz, and Clark County. I will tell you, I have people in my agency who've been working for over 30 years messaging me saying, Hillary, never in my entire life have I ever seen anything like this. And to date, the 300 fires, 50% west of the Cascades already, 50% east. And if you haven't seen the drought warnings that came out, a majority of the west side is really in a very challenging environment. And the sad truth is our state has not prepared to have those kind of the firefighting resources we need in that amount of area and over the context of March all the way through November. And we know that it's having a significant impact on our health. When for the first time also that I can think of, Spokane to Seattle had the worst air quality in the world last year. And I'm gonna just say, last year is likely not to be as bad as this year. You all know firsthand the significant challenge of our air quality. You understand firsthand and have probably been seeing this long before I was ever in this role, long before I was ever focused and working on the context of our trees. But you know how critical our trees are for the lifeblood of us, for the air we breathe, our water, and all of our land resources. The fact is, in Eastern Washington alone, we have 2.7 million acres of forest that are dying every single day. Half of that is on federal land, the other half state, tribal, and private land. And this has been a problem that's been in the making for a long time. Now, the good news is Washington State has taken a very significant leadership role. And in 2017, we developed a 20-year forest health plan to treat 1.25 million acres over the next 20 years in central and eastern Washington. It's about 70,000 acres a year. We are rapidly accelerating that work so that we can make sure we are protecting our forests for the long term rather than watching them go up in smoke and flames. Between 2005 and 2012, we treated 30,000 acres. Last year, we treated 35,000 in 1 year. This year, we've done 50,000 by the end, and we'll move quickly to 70,000. Our belief is we can change the trajectory of our forests, not only in the context of watching them die and actually reverse that, but also the ability to prevent them going up in smoke and flames. Now, the next action is we have not at all focused on the west side of the state, and I told you where we're seeing our fires, so we have a huge job in front of us to now move to the west side, which I'm going to need every single one of you and your help in how we develop that plan and shape it, because the west part of the state is very, very different from the east. We are leading a very significant push to rapidly change the way our lands are to make them more resilient besides the context of forest health. We're seeing, like I said, drought and dust bowl conditions on the 1 million acres of agriculture we manage. We're also seeing an opportunity to create more resilient communities. And to give a little bit of good news, we've now completed 21 wind leases in Washington State. We just signed the first solar farm lease with 34 more to go. Will be the largest solar farm in Washington State with 1,700 acres. When we put renewable energy on that land, as we fund schools, we need to be moving the diversity of our funding of our schools, like University of Washington, from just a forestry timber context to one of a diverser portfolio that is far more resilient and long-standing. When we do this, we actually move to a 98,000% increase in the revenue. How many people talk to their investors anytime in the last 20 years and got a 98,000% increase in their investment? We see the ability of actually moving to a more resilient state and doing it in a way that is economically, socially, and environmentally responsible, and this is one of those examples. Salmon. We all watched as the fires were burning. I didn't do anything. I am really not technologically advanced. Sorry. That's all right. Sorry about that, folks. Great. As we were watching the smoke and flames in our skies last year, we were also watching our salmon, our orcas struggle, as we watched one of our orcas carry salmon on the backs that had died for weeks on end and move not only the state but this nation. I spent 25 years as an environmental land use attorney, most of my work spent on trying to protect salmon and feeling that we were making very little progress and knowing every single year we're getting more and more deeper in the hole. We don't have a choice to let these iconic species die. And you know most how important the urban environment is for their long-term survival. And the reality is we spent most of our time actually focused in more of the forest, the federal lands, the state lands, in the rural areas to address it. rather than knitting up the entire ecosystem. So in very soon time, we are actually going to announce a new approach to the way we manage our lands in the full system for salmon recovery. And this is how each one of you come in the urban forestry context. As the largest landowner truly in the Washington state, second only to the federal government, but the most diverse amount of land, not only do we have our agriculture and our forest lands and the most amount of recreation lands next to the federal government, but we also manage a pretty significant urban commercial portfolio, from Costco's and Swedish hospitals to Safeways to the Edgewater. We manage the Edgewater. We believe, and then we manage the 2.6 million acres of aquatic lands. What has not been done in this state is truly knit the entire ecosystem for salmon habitat up into one. And urban forestry and green infrastructure is absolutely critical to that. So we've identified 5 key watersheds we will be focusing in and knitting up the entire ecosystem. Starting with federal lands, because we can now do salmon habitat restoration and projects on federal lands, not only forest health, but culvert replacement, salmon habitat, tree reforestation, knitting it up to our state lands, oftentimes very adjacent, bringing in the larger landowners too as a partnership, all the way down into the cities and counties and their footprint, and bringing in our ability of the urban forestry program into that, along with aquatic lands and our land leases that are there, to actually truly be an aggressive plan in each watershed that we've identified to show that we can truly change the trajectory of our Chinook and other salmon species if we really target fully and knit the entire ecosystem together. And this is where urban forestry comes in. We've watched for a long time here in Washington State where everybody values their trees, but unfortunately we watch them day by day go. And no one's really understanding the value of those trees for the long-term trajectory, not only of the environment, but also the health of a community. We are working tirelessly to make sure that our urban forestry program actually brings more resources to this. It will likely be in a much more targeted way, with the hope of bringing more green infrastructure expertise in each one of those watersheds so we can show that we can change the trajectory of it. In addition, thanks to the leadership of the Department of Natural Resources Urban Forestry Program, we are also trying to bring a new understanding around how some people have access to clean environment, trees, parks, and open space, and some do not. Urban Forestry Program, thanks to the leadership, thank you in the back. Without me even knowing, I put an idea out. I think it was my first 2 months. I said, I worked on an equity atlas for the city of Seattle and for King County that actually mapped those communities who have access to green space, access to trees. And I layered it with the context of people of color, people who speak English as a second language, and low income, to find the disparities. And within 1 year, my team, without me knowing, was probably the best Christmas presents I ever got. They mapped the entire state based on race and income and access to green spaces. Now we need to dive in at a richer, deeper level, and with that information, and target those communities to help change the trajectory. This last year was a tough one in the budget. We got some great things in the context of forest health and wildfire. We were not as successful. We worked to get $2 million for our urban forestry program so we could actually bring more resources and leadership into our work and be more of a partner with each and every one of you in our local governments. We were unfortunately not successful in $2 million, but I will say, doesn't mean we're not coming back next year. The more we're back, the more we're raising this as a profile, the more we'll actually get the interest. And especially if we can knit it up with the larger context of salmon recovery, the larger issue about health and equity and race and social justice, I think we'll be successful. I will say we can't shy away from the fact that we did get 1 FTE, and I know that sounds like not much. We got 1 additional FTE, but that's more than we've really ever gotten before. And that's a big deal because we need to build up on those successes, and the goal with that is that we will be leveraging them to be more effective in those watersheds we've talked about to make success. In addition, we, the Washington State Urban and Community Forestry Program at DNR is working hard with our partners through technical, educational, financial assistance. I have to just make a big shout out to our nonprofit organizations because we couldn't do this work without you. You're in the communities. You have the opportunity to build bridges and bigger partnerships from Plant Amnesty, the UW, the Nature Conservancy, Trust for Public Land, Forterra, Mountain to Sound Greenway, King Conservation District, Seattle, Audubon, and many of the cities and towns who are really pushing the Tree City USA program. It is a big deal, and our hope is to build that broader stakeholder and partnership within those watersheds specifically so we can truly show the value of partnership, the value of engagement, and the importance of urban forestry, not only in the context of better health, but also in a rapidly changing environment and the importance and need for them. I'll finish, because most of this is much more important to take questions and answers, but I will finish with the context of my 3 boys. I was blessed to be able to grow up in an environment of a farm, and my grandparents ranched in Pierce County, as well as the city of Portland that frankly has been a leader for a very long time, and the importance of land use planning and the importance of protecting the environment and doing it in a way that our cities, as much as our rural communities, have connection to the landscape. And when I had my first child, I was living in Seattle, and I very much knew that if I didn't have the opportunity to connect them to the landscape the same way my grandparents did and my father did, they might not grow up with a true understanding and value of the environment. And frankly, our kids are the leaders of tomorrow. If they don't have the connections to that environment, all the work we've done to protect it, to put policies in place and investments could be lost. So I was blessed and fortunate to raise my boys, all 3 of them, on a farm on Bainbridge Island. It was a 1,200 square foot house, 2-bedroom home. But let me tell you, it was raucous largely because there was no space. But the greatest thing they had is the outdoors. And so and I actually homeschooled them for quite some time with the belief that most of their education and learning would actually come outside. And so at 12 each day, my sanity happened, and they were sent outside. So it didn't get so raucous. That was my peace and quiet for a moment. But I let them spend literally 5 to 6 months completely unattended. Yes, do not turn me into CPS. It's too late. They're all good. And I have to tell you a story because I sent them outside, and I said, go. And they were 2, 4, and 8. They had the Puget Sound a block away. They had forests. I didn't put limits on where they go. Kids should be able to know what they can and cannot do, and what they're capable of. And I remember actually months, I was a practicing attorney trying to do this all at the same time, right? And I was a city council member, right? So I needed some time to get work done, right? And so I remember coming, their dad came in one day and goes, do you know what they've been doing outside for all these months? And I was like, I have no idea. They're alive every night when they come home. That's really all that matters. Well, and what had happened was, he goes, you gotta see this. And I go out, and my boys, and I was on the city council, and Bainbridge is an interesting place to serve, but they had built a 9x6 log cabin out of wood. They had built a courthouse. The log cabin was a city hall. They had built plots that you could buy and sell. They had a money system. They were having an election. They were having an election, and you know my kids. They were having an election, and the middle son, who was 5 by this time, comes to me. He's like, oh, "This is the most important day of my life." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Today's the election, and I want to be mayor." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "But my older brother's already bribed the younger brother for his vote, and I don't know how I'm going to get it." And he goes, "But I have a great plan for this community. I'm going to turn the city hall into a community center. We're going to have pea patches everywhere. Crime will be gone. We're going to open these properties. biggest moment of your life? To do something, this doesn't matter for you to be married because you've been ruling this nest for a long time, you're the oldest. This is what your brother, I go, you know what to do. So come home that day from City Council and he goes, Mom, my dad and I married. And he's like jumping up. A month later, there was a military coup, he's thrown out, but they learned democracy and diplomacy. I mean, it feels like Game of Thrones sometimes. Now, roll forward the next year, I did the same thing, of course, right? And the next year, 4 months later, this is where I'm worried about humanity and the hope of generation, because I did give them all this space. They had removed every part of that town and community, and they had built a golf course. So, you see, now what I'll tell you is my kids are the most independent, most confident kids out there. They handle all of their problems. They have, and largely it's because they have the freedom on the landscape to create their vision, to be able to live the way they wanted to do it. And while I'm not, my oldest is a junior in Tufts and plans to move to New York City and work for Morgan Stanley and mergers and acquisitions, I have not given up that I've lost them, because at the root of them, they know their identity. And their identity was that freedom and the value of the land, the value of the water, and how much it restored their bodies and fulfilled their spirits. And honestly, we have a responsibility here with the fastest growing state, where we're watching our forests and our farmlands be lost. We're watching the critical species that depend on those landscapes, to truly find a way where we can meet the needs of a growing population and not lose the heart and soul of Washington State, its landscapes, and that we build them for every single person, no matter their background, no matter where they live, in the most urban areas to the most rural areas. And if any place can do it, it's right here in Washington State, and I am looking forward to working with you to make it happen. Thank you. I'm just going to move around.
Hillary, thank you for your presentation. Reminder of your energy level. You said something that is momentous. As a member of the Washington State Community Forestry Commission, I have participated in conversations with multiple commissioners of public land. We have asked for state support of an urban forestry position, because now the two people who serve urban and community forestry within DNR are federally funded. I think you just told us that there will be now a state-funded urban forestry position. It's a start.
I agree. It's a start. Yeah. I mean, here's what I've learned about Washington State and the legislature trying to get things done. There's a lot of people with a lot of needs, and we know them. The first and most important step is a plan, to be honest. I mean, I just got the largest amount of funding for forest health and wildfire. When I started in this job just 2 years ago, we had one person for forest health in the entire agency. And with the plan for forest health and with wildfire, we are now seeing $50 million being able to actually build a program, invest, and make a difference. What we need to do now is the same context of really being able to show the value of urban forestry, to tell that story and how it has real impact, right? Because legislators have a lot of competing needs and demands. And part of the way I'm hoping to do that is in that salmon strategy I talked about, which is knitting the ecosystem. You guys understand how the system works, right? But we always think in this, here's my property, here's their property, right? Here's my job, jurisdiction, here's their jurisdiction. Salmon don't know that. Just like wildfire and forest health and disease don't know jurisdictional boundaries. We have to start to implement a plan plan that shows when we knit the system up and we get everybody invested along the system, that we can make a difference. And within that story, we can't just make it about salmon, even though that right now is very much holding people's attention and it's critical, but that it's also about people. And it's about the health of people, especially as our cities are growing more rapidly. And that's my hope, is to show the numbers, to show the impact, to show the value, tell that story, so legislators say, I want more of that in every single part of our state.
When the financial crisis hit 2008, we were in the beginning of a 2-year effort to write a tree ordinance manual for small communities. And because we have a 2-year budget in this state, the real impact of the recession didn't hit for a while, so the project was shelved in its second year. And I don't know that it's been restarted, but I haven't heard of any news about urban forestry legislation on a state level until this year, when private lands were allowed to have increased density and construction similar to the City of Seattle accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So the situation it appears to have been stagnant and has just recently dove. And I realize that you're not involved with private lands. However, I think that DNR should be setting an example and exceed standards so that the mayors and city councils of these municipalities around the state can be empowered and emboldened to protect urban forests.
Yeah, no, it's a great, I mean, actually, that's where I first met you, besides cello class. Her daughter's an amazing cellist. My son, not so much. He actually knows that, so I can say that. We were working on a tree ordinance in Bainbridge Island, and it was the midst of the recession, and we had no resources. Like, we had no funding. And I remember it was largely through the work of community, and a brilliant community who has expertise that helped us but it took an enormous amount of work, and there was no resources at the state level. So I understand personally how challenging that was. Part of my role this year was actually to get that funding, to raise the profile. If you don't ask, you don't get. It doesn't mean you always get the first time you ask, right? But our hope is now we're going to build a stronger, richer program. Our small forest landowners are actually, they were gutted in this budget too, right? And if anybody's looked, we have 40% of our state is in our forest is in small forest land ownership, 40%. And if anybody's been at a small forest landowner meeting, most of them are over 70 years old. Everybody should take pause, right? Rapidly growing. Many of these forests on the edge of urban growth boundaries, right? And I've not seen the next generation coming to those meetings. And I'll say that's one of my biggest concerns, is the bigger forest conversion that's likely to happen, and there is no support from the legislature and funding to actually help. And our program for small forest landowners, we have 2. We were gutted in the recession. We used to have 6. And so between the urban forestry side and that is going to be our most significant challenge ahead. We'll keep fighting for it. Look, we got a youth in the room. I wanted to say that. Wait, I actually do this. I know. Can I do this 1 second? Everybody under 25 and under, stand up, please. Stand up. Stand up. I'm going to tell you, I was in an audience of 700 people, and only 20 of them were 25 and under. It was wonderful that at 8 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday, 700 people showed up for the environment. I just want to say that, no offense to all those who came. But to the young people, thank you for caring. Thank you. You are your future. We want to be with you. We need more of you. Please let us know how we can help get more of you. Thank you.
Yes, so each of this sort of new perspective tying the rural, the federal lands, state lands, and also urban lands together in a watershed perspective to improve salmon. I found that to be really encouraging. If you think about, if we were to conserve all the pristine land in